Finally, this is the last of the textbook-facing videos for Chapter 8 here. This is 8.10 Garbage Collection. For those of you following along with the book, this is on page 540 and 541. This is another one of those concepts that is better described with a story first rather than with code first. So what I'll tell you is the concept is that inside of the Java virtual machine, so this is when it is actually running as part of an application. So not when you are compiling, not when you are editing the code, but actually when this is up on its feet and running someplace inside of a virtual machine. So, think about things like your DVR, think about things like your radio in your car. The idea here is that the JVM itself will periodically run through and search for things and remove things that are no longer being actively referenced. Variables that you create inside of methods that you use, you do math on, you return a value. What happens to that storage space? Well, it just sits there. What happens to objects that you create, that you pass to other objects that you make copies of that you no longer reference? Well, they just sit there. The idea behind garbage collection is that Java itself, via the Java virtual machine, so that's the environment it's actually running in when it's running, says, we got to get rid of some of this stuff. And that's the idea of garbage collection. Now, what I'll tell you is garbage collection is a process that is periodically run. You cannot see me do the air quotes here, but I'm doing periodically run inside of air quotes. That means you ain't got no control over when it is that garbage collection comes through and does its job. There's no way for me to tell you. This is a good idea of when to expect garbage collection to run. We can't do that. How many things can garbage collection delete and recover at one time? Can't tell you that either. What I will tell you is garbage collection, or the lack thereof, is actually one of the reasons that people in the development community have searched for different and better ways to be able to run applications across multiple platforms. We haven't gotten quite an answer yet. It's actually one of the reasons that JavaScript came along, because it's a little bit lighter weight. So what I'll tell you is in the form of a story about garbage collection. For anybody who's ever had a DVR, you have had a machine that runs a Java virtual machine inside of it. The reason for that is, we've got 1,000 different network providers. We've got hundreds of different cable, ISP providers. That's probably not true. We have 6 cable providers. We have 3 companies in the United States that do internet service providing. And we've got dozens and dozens of manufacturers that can make crappy but usable DVR boxes for them. So developers go through and we develop the user interface that allows you to sign in with your Spectrum or your Comcast or your Verizon account, allows you to browse the guide, it allows you to browse the DVR, it allows you to go find on-demand content, blah, 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 blah. Everything that a DVR does. Wonderful, it's great. And for the first few weeks, everything runs really great. For the next couple of weeks, things start to slow down a little bit, right? You hit guide, and you can kind of count to 2 before the guide pops up. You can hit enter on a channel, and you can kind of count to 2 before, the actual selection happens, and you can see audio and video. And then a couple of weeks later happens, and you hit enter on a channel, and you get audio first, and then moments later you get video. What's happening is the space, the RAM, the memory, the swap space in some cases, that the Java virtual machine has available is getting less and less and less. Think about that idea about the arrays. If I load all of your channels into an array and I leave it, that means that I have this big block of contiguous memory that cannot be used for anything else until garbage collection comes around. Well, that's a problem. Now what happens if I have just the list of things that you've DVR'd put into an array? Now I have the list of all of your DVR in an array that sits around until garbage collection comes around. Well, that's a problem. So garbage collection needs to happen, but if your Java virtual machine is busy doing things like getting updates in the background, it's busy having you interact with the DVR, it's busy, giving advertising companies a list of your history and things that it's doing. All of these things are preventing garbage collection until one day you go to turn on your television and it lazily turns on. You try to change the channel and it won't change. You try to open the DVR and it won't do. And what is your last resort? Your last resort is to unplug the thing, which does what? It kills that Java virtual machine. It essentially allows everything to be zeroed back out, and it provides you with a fresh, clean instance of that program that's going to pop up the next time around, and you can keep going from there. That's essentially what garbage collection does. What I will tell you is one of the few tools that we have available to us as developers is the idea of finalize. So this is a class that has a method called finalize. It's automatically called. Essentially, it marks your code, it marks your, that space that you've sucked up in memory. It allows that to be garbage collected the next time that comes along. So you would create a finalize method, which essentially just says, hey, kill everything that I have in here. So it's a void type. It doesn't actually return anything. So if you know that when you're done making copies of objects, that you always have one as a reference copy, and the last thing you want to do to that reference copy is finalize it, which means mark it for deletion. Well, it may or may not run, and it may or may not recoup that space. It is a good idea to have a finalize method in there which destroys, all of the, or theoretically might destroy all of the, that memory space that you just sucked up. However, again, there's no way for me to tell you exactly when that is going to execute. So you can't even be assured that your finalize method is going to execute. Here in the text, there is no, and this is not particularly satisfying for me as an instructor to say, hey, you would call a method called finalize that will bring the garbage collector here theoretically. There is no code sample for you in the text. What I will tell you is it comes up again in Java 2 because we have a little bit more of a granular toolkit for where and how we can do some of these larger scale applications, and finalize really is a very good idea in there. So what I'll tell you is finalize and garbage collection, these are just things to tuck away at the back of your head. These are not necessarily things that we are going to be able to demonstrate in code. They're not necessarily things that we're going to be able to demonstrate in Visual Studio Code or in Replit so that you can see how they work. It's just have an idea of the live living space where your application is functioning inside of, and have an idea that those resources are precious, and have an idea that those resources, if not used properly, create waste, and that waste creates slowdowns. That's really a much better tool for you as a developer now than seeing the garbage collection is.